Folks, in today's episode of the Soul Talk podcast, I get to interview someone I deeply respect, someone that has inspired my life since I was a teenager. I picked up some of his books when I was a kid in London, 12, 13 years old. Was it Aladdin? Aladdin Factor? Was that like Aladdin
Yeah,
Factor?
yep,
Obviously, Chicken Soup for the Soul books. They sometimes say you should never meet your heroes, but when I was 18 years old, as folks, I won a green card, came to America. When I was 18, I rode the bus, came straight to Los Angeles. I rode the bus to, I think it was Culver City.
right.
And I tracked down this guy who you're about to meet. You probably know who he is, folks. The amazing Jack Canfield, unannounced at 18 years old, knocked on his office, harassed his staff, refused to leave. He probably doesn't even remember this, but I refused to leave. And they said, "Well, Jack's not around there." And then someone went in an office, and Jack Canfield comes out. Like for me, this was like meeting freaking Michael Jordan. And I'll never forget. And this is something I want everyone to know going into the conversation. A lot of people talk a good talk on stage. They say a lot of beautiful things, but this guy sat down with a random, you know, almost stalker 18-year-old kid who has no idea, just shows up unannounced in his Culver City office. And I'll never forget that Jack Canfield sat down with me for about an hour, 45 minutes, and, was so generous, so gracious, so kind. No Instagram, no YouTube, no public promotion, and just he talked to me about life and my dreams and aspirations and told me, go do this seminar, go do that seminar, go do insight, this, that, 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 that. Read these books. And I'll never forget that moment of kindness that probably he didn't even know had such a profound impact on my life. So it is a joy and honor to bring the one and only Jack Canfield, someone who's inspired me for decades now. Jack, welcome.
Thank you. I had forgotten that. Thanks for reminding me. That's cool.
Yeah, I'll never forget it, man. I'll never forget it. Folks, the man doesn't need too much of an introduction. 50 years now, you've been teaching, Jack. This is like wild. Like it's mind-boggling. 50 years you've been teaching, sharing a message, inspiring people. Um, I'm curious, what has kept you going for 50 years? What's been the inspiration? I know that you have your final event coming up in June called Breakthrough
Right.
to Success. And it's like, I guess I want to ask like why are you retiring? But first just tell me
Yeah, sure.
50 years, like what what,
Well,
what what's that
I
been like?
it's been amazing. And I started out as a high school teacher, as you may remember. And I quickly learned that my kids it was an all black inner city high school in Chicago. And the kids were not, they had low self-esteem. They weren't motivated to achieve. They didn't believe in themselves. So I became more interested in that than I did in teaching history. And I
Mm,
reached out to Min and W. Clement Stone, took a couple of seminars with his foundation called the Achievement Motivation Program. How do you motivate people to want to achieve more and learn about values and affirmations and visualizations and goal setting and all that stuff. And I started teaching it to my kids. And I can tell you a quick story. So I'm coming home from somewhere and I went through O'Hare Airport in Chicago. I get home and I open up my suitcase. And this is like 5 years ago. And when I was teaching in high school, I was in my 20s, so I'm 80.
wow.
So that was like 60 years ago. And I see a card that someone had put in there. And it said, if you're the Jack Canfield who taught at Calumet High School, I want you to know that your class changed my life. And I'm thinking
Wow.
like, wow, are you kidding me? Because he had seen my name tag and he was the head of baggage and security for O'Hare Airport. He saw my name tag on my suitcase going by and he thought, oh my God, I wonder if that's the same Jack Canfield. So so anyway, that I started then teaching teachers how to build self-esteem in the classroom.
Wow.
And what keeps me going, or has kept me going, is
Mm,
that I love watching people wake up. I love
mm,
just talking to you when you were in my office, and I've done that with a number of people,
mm,
is like the desire for you all to be more successful and for me to help you do that. That's what fulfills me. Now,
mm.
I never thought I would retire. I told my wife I'm going to teach till 105, which is
Yeah.
the day I've decided I'm going to die, live to 105. So in a seminar, and someone said, "Well, how old do you want to be?" And I said, 105. And he went, "Great. Let's
It's a
start
good
figuring
number.
out what you have to do to be there." So I've been doing all that, eating well and exercising and meditating and yada yada. So I literally thought I would never stop. And then I had my 80th
Mm,
birthday last summer, and something about that got my attention. And then I started noticing that I never had a free day where I could just like get up and have no commitments of any kind for my
Wow.
wife, for a podcast like this, for a preparation call, for planning something, for doing an ongoing coaching group, traveling to do a gig. I was just in India for a week about 3 weeks ago, doing seminars in 3 cities. So it's like I love the experience of being on stage. I love coaching. I love watching people get it. But I also realized one day I'm not taking enough time for me, my grandsons, my wife, and I want to just wake up and have days where I wake up and there's no have tos, there's no shoulds. It's just like I get to do what I want to do. And I'll share one last thing with you. As you probably know, I've been doing ayahuasca, which is a plant medicine with shamans down in Costa Rica for the last 5 or 6 years. And one of the sessions, I had this image come over me about well, we were supposed to forgive the unforgivable. That was the intention. Forgive the unforgivable. I thought I'd forgiven everybody, my parents, my ex-wives, their lawyers, everybody. And all of a sudden, Vladimir Putin's face shows up. I thought,
Wow.
oh my God, I got to forgive Vladimir Putin. So I started to see what led his life. What was the binding traumatic stuff that happened to him as a kid?
Mm.
What were his compensations? What did he need to do to feel enough? Which is to put the Soviet Union back together. That's his big. He wants to be remembered in history as this giant guy, and be worthy of success and reputation, and feel like he's significant. So I see that. I forgive him. This big rush of energy comes out of my body. Any resentment that I was holding disappeared. And then I saw my office door and it opened up. And the first 3 to 4 feet of my office is a shrine to my significance. Pictures with me and presidents and book covers that are framed and pictures with Oprah and, the honorary doctorates and diplomas. And I went, oh my God, I'm a little Putin. I'm
Wow,
one
that's powerful.
yeah, it's like I need
Yeah.
to feel significant. And I think what happened was my desire to serve is still there, but my need to feel significant has disappeared. So it gave me permission to just cut back a little bit and say, okay, I'm taking a year off and I'm not going to do anything. And if something emerges that really wants to capture my attention, I'm not going to deny that. But
Right.
basically, um, you know, going to be taking some time for me.
Yeah, to have the freedom to allow and see what's kind of emerging
Right.
versus a kind of have to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
what, a lot of what you teach, about
yeah,
how just
yeah.
be in the flow and what shows up intuitively and honor
Mhm,
that.
mhm. Beautiful. Um, Success. I want to dive into success.
Sure.
What in 50 years, what you've learned, like there's so much, do this, don't do that, smoke this, don't smoke that, go here, walk barefoot, eat this. What's the like, help us cut through all of this kind of contradictory nonsense. What have you found consistently? If someone's listening and they're like, I want the code, like Jack, what is the success? Like, give me the code of what you have tested and verified that like this works. Help me crack the success code. Maybe I haven't achieved it. Maybe I've kind of got to a certain level. I'm at a ceiling. Help me
Right.
crack the code.
Well, I would say for starters, let's put a context around the code. The context is that I believe everybody has a purpose. We're unique. We all have some role to play. We're all cells in the body of humanity. And some of us are just like in your body, you have liver cells and heart cells and lung cells and lip cells and hair cells and all that. And they're all necessary. And so the first thing is we got to get clear about what is our purpose and what does success mean. To me, I redefined purpose or success a number of years ago. It used to be able to do anything you want, whenever you want, with whomever you want, as much as you want, that kind of thing. And then I changed it to fulfilling my soul's purpose. If I fulfill my soul's purpose, then I'll have the experience of true success. And purpose, Stephen Covey said you don't want to get to the top of the ladder and realize the ladder's leaning against the wrong wall. So a lot of people achieve what they think is success. They have the cars, the money, the fame, the fortune, the trophy wives, whatever, but they're still not happy. And so they chase the wrong thing. Now, it all that can be happy. I have a lot of money. I have a nice house. I have a nice wife. I have a nice car, all that. But that's not what I've been chasing. What I've been
Right.
chasing is the fulfillment of my purpose. So once you, so really that's kind of the first step. is to get clear. What is your purpose? Why are you here? What the Japanese called your ikigai, what we call, our life purpose. And then the next thing is you've got to take 100% responsibility for your life. You have to give up blaming, complaining, and excuse making because
Mm,
everything happens now in the context of I'm responsible for my life, for my outcomes, for my experiences, for my feelings.
mm,
And I teach a formula, as you know, called E plus R equals O. There's an event in your life. You then respond either with a thought, an image, or a behavior, and then you get an outcome called E, the event. I mean, the
mm,
outcome. Oh, the outcome. So E plus all reaction response equals outcome. So what we're all complaining about in life and what is the outcomes we're getting. We're not happy. We're overweight. We're not feeling energetic. We don't have the money we want. We don't have the amount of followers on YouTube or whatever we
mm,
want. So those are all outcomes. So once I'm clear about my purpose, then I have to create a vision for what is the fulfillment of that purpose. And I got to take responsibility for everything I experience going forward. And one of the great things about responsibility is if you realize you created your life the way it is, you have the power to uncreate it. Because
yes.
if you think it's because of your parents or because of racism or because of Donald Trump or because of, where you live or whatever, then you're always going to think the power's out there. So you have to
Mhm,
re-own that
mhm,
power, which means owning your mistakes, owning
mhm,
the stupid things you did as well.
mhm.
But we're not perfect, so we have to also honor that. We're perfectly created, but we make a lot of messy mistakes along the way.
But what if
Um,
what if someone is like, Jack, my circuit, I was abused by my parents and
yeah,
till 18. And what if there was certain circumstances that, seem real, shit
yeah,
happened,
yep, they did.
and how do I take 100% responsibility for, I don't know, being abused by my dad or beaten or what have you? Because
Well, here let's do a sidebar, and then I'm going
yes.
to pretend the sidebar isn't important. But the sidebar is that everyone that sits in here, all the spiritual teachers that really know what they're talking about, all the mystics, all the people that have had near-death experiences and have come back from wherever they went and talked to God or Jesus or Buddha or whatever, they all tell us that we chose our parents. We chose our race. We chose if we're going to be gay or not. We chose all that because we had lessons to learn to develop ourselves, our soul, if you will. And so if I choose to be someone born in Yemen, I'm going to have a different experience than someone who chooses to be born in India or born in New York in a rich home. So, my kids were always like saying, well, you're a mean dad. I said, well, you chose me. Sorry, kid. And you chose me because you had lessons to learn. And so I'm not saying that being abused was fun. I was abused. My dad was a violent alcoholic who basically beat me, threatened me with a gun, threatened me with a knife, etc. My mother fortunately left him when I was 6, so I got to escape that for a while. But it's just what it is. And everyone who's been abused, well, let me say this one. I have worked with literally over 1 million people on the planet in live
Wow.
seminars, let alone online. And everyone, when we go back to our childhood trauma, realize that that trauma actually had a benefit for me. I learned to be resilient. I learned to be
Mm,
courageous. I learned to ask for what I want. I learned how to say no, how to stand up for myself,
mm, mm,
etc. I learned how Tony Robbins says, and I agree with him, everything happens for you, not to you. And so if
mm,
we take that attitude, then we can look for the lesson, we can look for the gift. But if we don't do that, that famous Napoleon Hill quote, every negative event has a seed of an equal or greater benefit. The
mm.
problem is that most people don't remember the next line, which says, but you have to look for it. In other words,
Right.
we have to look to see what was the benefit, what was the lesson, what can I take away from that? My work, my dad being violent made me hyper aware, hyper alert, hyper vigilance, they call it. And basically, you're just always noticing everything because when he was around, you had to, or you could, something was off, you were going to get in trouble. You get
Yeah.
beaten.
Yeah.
Make me a good point guard in basketball because I can look at you and see
Mm,
everything around me and know pass it over there, not even look. It
mm.
made me a great trainer because I can see what's happening in the last row while I'm talking to someone in the front row. I'm
Right.
paying attention at a very high level. That was a gift, the gift of courage to stand up against my father at some point and say, no, you can't do this to me anymore. Even with my stepfather, I remember he swung at me once. He was really pissed off. I was about 16 and I'd been studying judo and I flipped him. And my mom said, "Run! I'll tell you when it's safe to come home." So finally, he did. And then when I got home, my dad apologized and said, "I guess I have to treat you like a man now." you know.
Mm.
But I had that ability to take that stand, which I had developed that strength, if you will. That was not necessarily because I'm very sensitive, very caring,
Mm.
but I also need to have my strength. You have to have your warrior
Mm.
side and your angelic side, if you will, the yin and the yang, the male and the female. So I think if you've been abused, I have empathy for that. I've been there. I know what that feels like. But it's not an excuse. It's not a
Right.
reason not to go for what you want. We can sit around and blame our parents. So E plus R equals O. Blaming is a response to an earlier event. It doesn't create a better outcome. It
Mm.
never does. So basically, you have to take responsibility and say, okay, I'll give you an example. Another one. My stepfather, who my mother married after my first father, one morning he said, "Get up! I don't hear any feet moving around down there." I was going to be late for school. I overslept, and I put my foot outside the bed, and I went like that, so he could hear my foot. I went, pulled my foot back in bed, went to sleep. And
Uh-oh.
so he comes in, and he's really pissed now because he realized he has to drive me to school, and we lived far away, so it was not on his way to work. And so he was mad. And as he came into my room, he was in his boxer shorts and a t-shirt, and he stubbed his toe. Turns out he broke his toe, and then he hit me. And and I have to say that if I was responsible for getting hit. Not that I'd condone it, but if I
Mhm.
hadn't lied to him and put my foot out and done that thing,
Mhm.
I wouldn't have gotten hit. So I'm partially responsible for what happened to me in that moment. I could go
Mhm.
around and say, "Oh, my dad was abusive. He hit me," and so forth. Which, I don't condone his behavior of how he dealt with his anger. But the point is, you and I know lots and lots of people who've been abused as children who went on to be very successful
Yeah.
people. So
Yeah.
it's not an excuse. So, you know, I would say ultimately you want to forgive your parent. Your parents were doing the best they could with what they knew how to do. The
Mhm.
knowledge, the awareness, the skills, the consciousness that they had was not what you and I have today. We're much more aware than
Mhm.
most of our parents were because we've had more time to grow and we've
Yeah.
invested in personal development and all that kind of stuff. And most of our parents haven't. So we
Mhm.
need to forgive them, move on. And one of my friends says, you don't even need to forgive your parents. Thank them for what they did to you because you had to grow as a result of it. So
Mm.
why why forgive
Mm.
them?
Mm. So, purpose, 100% responsibility.
Great. And then you got to decide what is it, what's the vision that's going to fulfill your purpose.
Mm.
So my purpose is to inspire and empower people to live their highest vision in a context of love and joy. I was doing that when I was a kid. I was
Right.
telling people they could go for it. Come on, I'll teach you how to throw the basketball. I can teach you how to play marbles better. Whatever it was, that
Mhm.
teacher was in me. You know, Ken Honda, who you know from Japan, basically kind of the one of us over there, and he uh, said to me on a podcast when I was interviewing him that if you really want to look at your purpose, one way to do it is look at when you were a kid, what did you spend most of your free time doing?
Mhm.
And he
Mhm.
said, I spent it talking. Now, what does he do for a living? He stands up on space stage
And
and he
talks.
talks. I was always teaching everybody everything. What do I do now? I
Mhm.
teach. So someone else played the guitar. Someone else,
Mhm.
played video games. Now they're inventing video games and making a lot of money at it or whatever.
Mhm.
So I think that's a useful way. And there's some techniques. You go in, you climb up a mountain, you ask a guardian angel to come down and give you a gift of what symbolizes your life purpose. So in my seminars, we always do a life purpose exercise right in the beginning so that people can get really clear what their
Mhm.
purpose is, and then what's a vision that will fill that purpose. So B, the vision was having a company that would run seminars and teach courses and write books that would teach people to be inspired, chicken soup for the soul, and empowered success principles and all these other things.
Mhm.
The Aladdin factor, which you mentioned,
Mhm.
was how to ask for and get everything you want. So
Yep.
it's a success tool. Most people
Mhm.
don't have that. They're afraid of rejection. So
Mhm.
basically, what's my vision? And it was to create a company. And then with Mark, we had a vision to sell 1 billion books by the year 2020. We've sold 650 billion, I think, million
In-
rather.
Inching
We're
closer.
getting closer. And then we had a goal in my company to train 1 billion people on the planet. I personally trained over 1 million. We've trained 5,000 trainers that are out there in
Wow.
117 countries that are teaching this training. I mean, I remember
Mm.
after there was a earthquake in Nepal, and my wife was over there the year after it happened, and we found out that some of my trainers were going village to village where
Mm.
people's houses had fallen down because they were just mud and dirt, and they were running seminars for people, getting them clear that they could overcome this.
Wow.
So that was very heartening to know that. And
Wow.
so again, what are the goals that fulfill your purpose? You know, write a best-selling book, sell
Mm,
100,000 copies of Chicken Soup for the Soul, or whatever.
mm,
So now we get granular. You know, what are the
mm,
goals that will achieve that? Is it writing a book?
mm,
Is it starting a podcast? In our case, you know, we're teachers and trainers. We do that. Having a YouTube channel, having a Facebook
mm,
community. You know, for someone else, it might be just opening a real estate office. It might be starting a
mm,
kitchen and running a cooking program, or you know, being the best mother on the planet. Raise five drug-free,
yeah.
responsible, compassionate children. That's enough of a purpose for anybody, you
Mm,
know, and not to judge your purpose that's not big enough.
mm,
Then once we have goals that have to be measurable in time and space, how much by when. In other words, I want to be a millionaire is kind of a goal, but by when, you know?
right.
Or most people say, I want to be rich. Well, what is rich? You have to define that. You know, is it
Hmm.
having 30
Hmm.
million in the bank at 8% interest and you get to be making 1 million a year? Or is it, you know, $100,000 a year job? But get really, really
Mm,
specific. And then what we want are the two, I call them acceleration tools, release the brakes tools, affirmations and visualization, and also identifying and releasing limiting beliefs. As you
mm,
know, all of us between the age of 3 and 8, we ended up making decisions. It's not okay to cry. It's not okay to ask for what you want. It's not okay to be sexy. It's not okay
mhm,
to make
mhm,
noise because mom has cancer. And so we grow up holding our tongue, you know. And so all those limiting beliefs, then the big ones, I'm not worthy. I'm not lovable. I'm not capable. I'm not smart. I'm not athletic. I'm not mathematically inclined. I'm not good with money. You know,
mm,
all of those are running us. And
mm,
for most people, they're subconscious. We don't even know we have it. We go to reach for the phone to make a call and we can't make ourselves do it. Why not?
mm,
You know, why don't we do the call? And the reason we don't is because the limiting belief comes up and it stops us, you know,
mm,
and that's unfortunate, but it's real.
mm.
So we have to be responsible to go back and do some processes that will help
Yeah.
us get in touch with the limiting goals, be aware of them, and then go
Mhm,
ahead and release them and replace them. So if
mm,
that's work, and you can do it
mhm,
with a therapist, you can do it with a coach like you and me. There are
mhm,
online programs. Um, I do a lot of plant medicine, which is called ayahuasca.
mhm,
It also
mhm,
just brings everything up you need to look at.
mhm,
You know, we talk about being in the flow. You cannot resist the flow
mhm.
when Mother Ayahuasca takes over.
I want you to
Um,
just speak to beliefs a bit.
yeah,
Let's say someone's listening and they become aware of some limiting beliefs. I can't do this. I'm not enough. I'm not worthy.
right.
Whatever it is. And I think sometimes we can have this understanding. Okay, this belief is in my way. Okay, I'm enough. But I don't. They say to you, okay, Jack, but I don't feel it. I'm saying
Yeah,
it. I know what I should believe.
right.
But like
Well,
I know in your seminar you work with this. So like,
yeah,
how do
yeah.
we actually change your belief?
Well, I've worked with a woman up in Canada. We're writing a book on it right now, which is a technique. There are a number of techniques. You can use EFT tapping, this belief that I'm not enough, and
Mhm.
you can tap on your 9 acupuncture points that they teach. You can go to YouTube, EFT, type it in. There are all kinds of people will walk you through the process. But I think the most powerful one is one I do, where we ask you to think of where's a place in your life where you feel stuck, something where you can't manifest what you want, or you manifest it but you can't maintain it, like a relationship, a good
Mm,
job, financial, abundance. So what happens is I then ask them, as they think about this place where they feel stuck or unable to manifest or create what they want, what shows up in your body as the most tension, pain, or numbness? And basically what's happened, we've locked down on our expression because as a child there was something that happened. It was our goal now is to get back to that moment. So then we say, okay, let's say it's a my first time I did it was a band of like a 2x4 across the back of my shoulders. Then
mm,
we'll say what we're looking. We want you to focus on that sensation. So I ask a bunch of questions like, what
mm,
color is it? How wide is it? Inches or centimeters? How thick is it? Is it wet? Is it dry? Is it hot or cold? You know, whatever. Now that we've got really clear about this sensation, I'll say inside that sensation, there's an emotion, a feeling like anger, sadness, grief, whatever, shame. And so now I want you to go back in time to the earliest time you can remember feeling that same sensation and feeling. So the sensation is physical, the feeling is the emotion. And then everybody goes back, with a few exceptions, to somewhere between 3 and 8, which is when all these were formed.
Mm,
And some people go back to 15 or 16. There was a traumatic event that occurred, but basically 3 and 8. And then I'll ask, where are you? Alone or with people? Is it daytime or nighttime? Are you in a house, a school, outside, inside, whatever? What's happening? Something's happening you don't want, like you're being bullied, you're being sent to your room, you're being abused, you're being raped, whatever. Or what is something you want that you can't seem to get, like your mother's attention, your father's approval, teacher saying good job. Now, the next question, and this is where the rubber meets the road, is what did you decide in that moment about yourself, about people, or about life? I'm not worthy. I'm not lovable. So just recently, I had a woman in a seminar, and she went back to she was like 3 years old. Her mother was
wow.
vacuuming the floor. She was trying to get her mother's attention. She couldn't. She decided if my mother loved me, she'd stop vacuuming and pay
Mm,
attention to me. Now,
mm,
we don't even know if her mother hurt her or her mother was
yeah.
preoccupied that day because they were going to lose their mortgage payment or whatever. But
Mm,
she decided, I'm not lovable. Now, then because there's so much emotion in that moment of feeling rejected,
mm,
every time you have a strong emotion along with an event, the memory locks in. We all know where we were on 9/11.
mm, mm,
If you're old enough, you know where you were when JFK was shot or Martin Luther King
mm,
was shot, or, we know because it was so much emotion, it locked it in. If you were abused or you were, whatever, it locks in. So now what we do is we get aware of this belief, and then I have them see a video screen. Touch the screen. You're going to see scenes in your life where you let this limiting decision or belief run you.
mm,
And
mm,
then they do. Oh my God, that time went. Oh my God, that time. Oh, I see what. Then we
mm,
say, your current age, go back and coach this little child. What would you say if you had a child that age now about that event?
mm,
Hey, honey, your parents, they didn't know any better. Your mom was preoccupied. It wasn't about you. It's never about you. It's more about them. You know, uh, had a woman whose parents were immigrants from Hungary and Canada, and this girl went into her mother when she was 11 and said the boy next door tried to, rape me. Oh, you're imagining that because she didn't want to have to confront the neighbors because they were
yeah.
new immigrants. So then she believed that my parents don't believe me and something wrong.
Mm,
And then her mother slapped her hand with a ruler,
wow.
lots. Now,
Mm,
at the time, she had arthritis in her hands. She couldn't hardly move her hands. At
mm,
the end of that session, her hands were fully moving.
wow.
And because she'd realized that it was her mother's issue, not her. She was not
Mm,
a liar. There's nothing she did wrong. And that she's had it to the end of the day. So we somatize these beliefs, become locked into the body, and they become disease. And they become, pain. That's why it's held in that feeling in your chest or a headache or whatever you're getting. So then I have them come up with a new decision, create an affirmation for that new decision. And now that affirmation has weight to it because of all this other
wow.
stuff that just happened.
Mm,
And then I have them imagine standing there holding their child's hand or their younger self's hand and saying that affirmation out loud 3 or 4 times with a lot of gusto. Then we have a
mm,
new screen over here to your right, which represents your future. This is where our memory most goes to the left or the past, right for the future. Now see scenes in the future where you can let this new belief manifest
mm,
and they say, "Oh yeah, in my job, I could do this with my husband. I could do that." And they're pre-programming themselves, pre-priming themselves for these events to be the way they want to be, and then we ask them to rehearse that in the future and also to repeat their affirmation, which now has validity. It's not just a bunch of words.
yeah.
And something I learned from a guy named Nate Zinser, who's the peak performance coach at West Point, our military academy. When he has his athletes thinking of an affirmation, every time they walk through a door, they have to touch the door jamb or the top of the door and say their affirmation. So I'm walking
Mm,
through the door and say, I am smart enough to do anything I want. They're coming out of the bathroom. I'm
wow.
smart enough to do everything I want. Well, you walk through doors 100 times a day.
Wow.
So
Wow.
one of the things we know about beliefs or about any habit, if you link the habit to something you already do, like when
Mm,
I was working up to doing 100 push-ups a day. Every time I would walk out of the bathroom, I had to get down and do as many push-ups as I could. I'm already going to the bathroom, right?
yeah.
So you link it with something you're already
Mm,
doing. So anyway, that's that works. What I just told you, we get people
mhm.
that literally it's gone. The old belief is gone,
Wow.
and
Wow.
obviously repetition is valuable. I also teach people put up little 3x5 or 3x3 post-it notes with the words cancel, cancel on them. Put one on your
Mm,
refrigerator, put one next to the mirror, put one next to your computer. So every time you walk by and you see one of these, you have to stop and say, what am I thinking? And if you're thinking something negative, or judgmental or anything other than a positive thought, you have to say cancel, cancel. You're telling your subconscious,
Mm,
don't take that in. And what I want you to do now is replace it with with your new affirmation. So it's another
mm,
example of a time when to reinforce the affirmation.
mm.
Um, so that's what we do.
Wow. Wow. Sounds, I'm just kind of going through it. I found myself going through it as you were sharing it.
Yeah,
I can feel the experience. Wow. You know, in terms of beliefs, I love your perspective.
sure.
Can we, if I have a belief, like I can do
Yes.
anything, can we, if I believe it enough, can I manifest it? You know, because there's this theory, like
Yeah.
if I just, I was speaking to someone about this the other day. If I believe that I'm can be the richest man on the planet, as one
Right.
example, if I really believe that enough, can I do it? Can it happen? Like, will it become my reality, or are there other elements at play?
There are other elements at play. So it's part of it. In other words, again,
Mm,
you know, think of your body. It has a heart, a lungs, a brain, a kidney, a liver, intestines,
right.
all that. And we need all of those for this to work. So often people will ask me
Mhm.
in a session like this, well, what are the three most important success principles? And I'll say, well, if you can only keep three organs in your body, which ones would you keep and how will that impact you? And they go, oh, I need my lungs, I need my nose, I need my mouth,
Right.
I need,
Right.
teeth, etc. So basically, belief is a critical thing. It's important. You
Yes.
got to stand on that belief.
Right.
Um, and I just was with Joe Dispenza on Saturday. We were both, or Friday, we were both presenting at a conference at the HeartMath Institute called Love Unleashed. And he was talking about the idea that our brain is a memory bank, right? And so it's basically operating off old data. And beliefs are just a thought you've thought over and over and over and over. If you were raised a Muslim, you think Muslim beliefs. If you were raised a Catholic, you
Mhm.
think Catholic
Mhm.
beliefs. If you were raised in South Africa, you think South Africa beliefs. So that's just because of the context, the school, the parents, the TV shows you watch.
Mhm.
You got programmed. And we're getting
Mhm.
programmed even more now to be divided by internet,
Yep.
and the TV shows and the
Yep.
algorithms and so forth. But the point being, I'm responsible for. You talked about the code earlier. We're coding
Yeah.
ourselves all the time, like computers. They have codes, and we can recode. And so, I love what he said. He says your personality creates your personal reality. In other words, your
Mm.
personality, what you believe, what you think, what you think creates emotions. In other words, if I see a snake over there coming toward me, I have to think, oh, that's dangerous. He might bite me before I can feel
Right.
fear. But if
Right.
I go, hey, there's a snake coming at me, I bet I can get out of the room faster than he can get over here. I won't be
Mhm.
afraid. I'll feel safe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's going into the future and imagining the biting that creates the
Mm.
fear, not the snake.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So
And my
basically,
2 month old, by the way, sees a snake in the garden, doesn't feel fear.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And if you say, don't touch that snake, he'll start to develop a fear of
Right.
snakes.
Right.
And, we just have to be clear. The green garden snake, you could touch that one, but
Mhm.
not the others yet until we identify them. That'll happen as you
Mhm.
get older,
Mhm.
because you don't want to be touching rattlesnakes and cobras and things like that. Not a smart idea. But, but yeah, and if you yell at him, don't touch that snake, what happens now, he's going to go into a major emotional place and he's
Yeah.
going to remember that. It's going to lock in much harder.
Right.
Because what
Right.
happens when you have strong emotions is your brain actually secretes more proteins that allows the neurons that are encoding that to get thicker. And so
Mhm.
you've heard the phrase, what fires together wires together. So
Mhm.
every time he sees a snake, he's going to have that memory of dad said, don't touch
Mhm.
it. And
The
that's
emotion.
going to make that neural
Mhm.
pathway, those
Mhm.
neurons get thicker. The dendrites at the end of them get thicker. And so what happens is biologically, they're building up a storehouse of fear in relation to snakes. Now,
Mhm.
we can go to a petting zoo and we can find a safe snake and we can pet it and it didn't bite us and we can begin to change all of that. I
Mhm.
think a healthy fear of most snakes is a good thing to have, especially especially in Africa and
Yeah.
so forth. But so I think that generally what we want to do is we want to have the belief. One of the with Muhammad Ali said something really great. He said impossible is a big word used by small people to justify staying small, roughly. I'm misquoting it totally, but that roughly he said, to me, impossible is an opinion, not a fact. And then he took the words impossible and he went I apostrophe M and then the second word possible and said I'm possible.
Impossible.
And he started saying I'm the greatest before he ever was. And for a
Wow.
while he was the greatest, right?
Mhm.
So he moved into that belief. He acted into it. So the belief is critical. It's a stand on which you stand,
Foundation. Mhm.
foundational, along with 100% responsibility. I'm responsible for my beliefs, and I'm responsible to change them if I need to, and learn how to do that. And that's what you and I are always teaching people these things. So now I can create an affirmation. There's two kinds of affirmations. What I call affirming yourself. So I'm a worthwhile person. I'm smart. I'm intelligent. I'm smart enough to do what I want. That those kind of things. And then there's goal beliefs. If I
Mhm.
have a goal, in your case, if it was to be the richest man in the world,
Mhm.
it'd be I'm so grateful and I'm so happy and grateful that I'm now the richest man in the world. Now that would be your goal. Okay. And
Mhm.
notice this is I am present tense.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And Greg Braden even tells you to do it as a thankfulness. I'm so
Yeah.
grateful that I'm now the richest man. Because if you say I'm now the richest man in the world, it's in the present moment.
Mhm.
Meaning you're thanking something as if it's already happened. So your mindset is, oh, this is a done deal. So
Mhm.
you always want to say I am. The unconscious takes the words I am as a directive. If
Mhm.
you say I
Mhm.
am scared, oh, you want scared? I'll give you scared. I
Mhm.
am sick. Oh, I'll give you sick. You know,
Mhm.
and so like you said earlier, when I said I was fighting off a cold, you said, oh, you're having a healing crisis or a cleansing.
Purification.
Purification. Yeah, exactly. It's a different thought.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's we got to be really mindful of the words we use. In my
Mhm.
house, we don't have a swear jar, but we have a jar for irresponsible statements. When you say I can't
Mhm.
or I'll try or I wish I could, that would be a quarter to the kids when they were growing up. So because I want them to see that these things were costing them something, not to punish
Mhm.
them, but to make them aware. In my seminars, we have fish bowls on the edge of the stage for the same
Wow.
thing. If you make an excuse, if you blame, you complain, you speak negatively about yourself, it's a fine of $2, and
Ah.
then that goes to charity. But you get, oh, yeah, I need to be reminded. And I love
Mhm.
that word, reminded, because we want to get our
Mhm.
our mind back. When we say remember, our brain's a member. We want to reprogram that.
Remind.
Think of your think of your brain as a computer and your environment as the screen. So everything
Mhm.
you see out in your world is a reflection of the programming in your brain. So if you're living in
Mhm.
poverty
Mhm.
and everywhere you look there's poverty stuff, that's what your
The
output,
mirror.
your programming. Most people don't know that what they're thinking is
Oh.
manifesting around them. So I can
Mhm.
tell what's happening in my computer
Mhm.
because it's doing all this coding that allows me to see your face, right?
Mhm.
And basically, we also have external hard drives. So I
Mhm.
have a wife who can act as
Mhm.
an external hard drive sometimes and
Mhm.
remind me of things I've forgotten.
You have a good wife as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's a great
But
wife.
yeah, you want to surround yourself with people who support you like that, not people who won't. So anyway, to go back to this little model, if you will, this system of success, this combination
Mhm.
lock. And I always say, if you know the combination to a lock, it has to open. Doesn't matter if you're black, white, yellow, brown,
Mhm.
old, young, live in New York, live in Houston, live in California, have a
Mhm.
high IQ, low IQ. That lock will open if you know the combination. So what
Mhm.
we're
Mhm.
looking at here is what are the numbers that you need to know in the right order. So if you do the
Mhm.
right order at the right time, then you're going to get the lock open for success. So
Mhm.
we've talked about vision, responsibility, purpose, talked about
Mhm.
setting goals, then visualizing that goal is complete already,
Mhm.
feeling the feeling you would feel. So let's just play out for fun because I know you weren't
Yeah.
probably serious about this, but nevertheless, if you were the richest man in the world and you woke up in the morning, what would you see? What would your environment look like? How would you decorate it?
Ah, ah.
Would you have paintings on the
Yeah.
walls? Would you have
Yeah.
a view of the ocean? Would you
I'm
be on
seeing
the
a
15th
huge
floor?
glass, through the glass, a big view, an ocean. Yeah, I can
Yeah, there
feel
you
it.
go.
I can
There you
see,
go.
yeah.
There you
Mhm.
go. So Patty and I, and Patty's my partner who, we were in Dubai and we got to go up to the 52nd and 53rd floors of the Burj Al Arab, which is actually the
Mhm.
the sheikh of Dubai, who it's his apartment when he wants it, but they rent it out to oligarchs for 20,000 a night,
Wow.
Russians basically, and that was exactly what floor to wall, floor to ceiling, glass walls.
Wow.
TV comes out of the ceiling so it doesn't block your vote during the day. The bed
Mm.
rotates 100%. All the fixtures in the bathrooms are gold. It's insanely rich. I mean, over the top. It was designed by Versace. So you can imagine. But I have a vision of what that looks like now. I have a vision of
Mm.
what it feels like to drive a Bentley because I've been in one. Not that I want to own one and I want to spend that much money on it, but
Yeah.
I know what it feels like. So you want to
Mm.
create something where you create the feeling and
Mm.
then visualize it every day. You've heard my story probably of
Mm.
I wanted to make $100,000 back in the 1970s. I didn't know how to do it,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I set a goal. I created $100,000 bill, took $100 bill, put a lot of zeros behind it, generated it out onto a big piece of paper with a overhead projector way back when, and then put that on the ceiling. And
Wow.
every morning I wake up, I'd see the $100,000 bill. I'd close my eyes. I'd visualize living the lifestyle. And I also would do my affirmation, which at that time was God is my unlimited supply.
Mm.
And I'm thankful that I'm earning, investing, and spending $100,000 a year.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
what happens was after about 30 days, I started having $100,000 ideas. Up till then, I never had.
Mm.
I
Mm.
realized, well, I could sell my book at the time, 100 Ways to Enhance Self-Confidence in the Classroom, was selling at 6.95. I got 25 cents royalty. My co-author also got 25-cent royalty. So I
Mhm.
said, wow, if I sell 400,000 books, that's $100,000. I never had a
Mhm.
thought like that. Now,
Mm.
now the question becomes, what actions could I take that would
Mhm.
promote the sale of 100,000 books? And
Mhm.
so we started a little online bookstore of
Mm.
my book, and we started doing ads in school newspapers and for teachers and things. And then my wife had a $100,000 idea. She said, Jack, now that we've started the bookstore, we're making $3 a book. We only have to sell 33,000 copies. And then I said, well, how do we do that? And I called up Reader's Digest to see what an ad would cost. Full page ad. It was $100,000, $108,000. And I said, I can't do that. I said, why not? I said, because I'd lose $8,000 if it's not going to work. But I said, I'll write an article for them. So I wrote an article. I
Mm.
sent that in. It got rejected. But I kept visualizing $100,000, $100,000. And then I got a talk at Hunter College. And this woman comes up to me and says, can I interview you? And I said, yeah. And she said, I loved your talk. I said, who do you write for? She said, the National Enquirer. I said, how many readers do you have? She said, 12 million a week. I said,
Ah.
whoa. So they wrote an article. We talked about the book. People started buying it. Make a long story short,
Wow.
I did not make 108. I did not make 100,000. I made $93,000 that year, but
Wow.
no one was complaining.
Yeah, it was moving again in the
Yeah.
trajectory.
And then my wife said, do you think it would work for a million? So we put $1 million bill on the ceiling. I started visualizing that. And in my seminars, I would put a slide up. I have a slide for a check to me for $1,138,000. And that was for the first 3 months of a year of Chicken Soup for the Soul. That's how many we sold. That was a
Wow.
royalty for 1 3 month period. We made
Wow.
$13 million that year. Of it was
Wow.
Yeah, it was a great year.
Wow.
But the point being, visualizing it. And here's the thing: you have to say it. Say your affirmation. Close your eyes. Visualize it. What you would see out through your eyes.
Mhm.
Because if you're looking at you up on the stage, that's called
Mm.
disidentified. You want to
Mm.
be in your body, looking
Mhm.
at, if you're on stage, be on stage looking at the
Mm.
audience or they're handing you a
Mhm.
diploma, you're taking it in your hands.
Mhm.
Feel the feelings you would feel and hear the sounds you would hear. So now we have auditory,
Mhm.
visual, kinesthetic. And most people don't spend enough time on the feelings. You got to feel the
Mm.
feelings.
Mm.
And then you just watch that for maybe a minute every morning. If you have 5 goals, do it for 5 minutes, one for each. Go about your day, do it again before you go to bed at night. And what happens is your subconscious mind now starts to come up with ideas. And
Mm.
there's this thing that NASA came up with called the um, the 30-day principle. You've got to do 30 days in a row.
Wow.
Then what happens? Your subconscious mind starts coming up with solutions. So if you
Wow.
take if
Wow.
you take day 16 off, day
Yeah,
17 is day one again.
they want.
Just
Right.
like
Wow.
Alcoholics Anonymous, if you
Um,
yeah. So, and then finally, to finish this out, you got to take action. You're going to start to get inspirations for action. And
Yeah.
also, there are obvious actions out there. You want to be a doctor, you got to go to medical school.
Hmm. Hmm.
But do the inspired thing too. Like maybe you decide one day you should take cookies over to Mrs. Jones and you don't know why, but you do, and you do. You find out her husband just died, and as you walk
Mm.
in, she said, "Oh, that's my nephew sitting on the couch. Let me introduce you." You find out he's the director of admissions for the Stanford Medical School, and
Wow.
because you
Wow.
followed your intuition,
Hmm.
and then ask, 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 ask. That's the book you read. You got to ask for support, ask for help, ask for what you want. Reject rejection, which means you're going to get no. So what?
Hmm.
Chicken Soup for the Soul. 144 people rejected that book.
Crazy, crazy. Wow.
144 people.
Most of us give up after like one.
I know. If I'd have given up after 100, you and I would have not met. I wouldn't have been where in that office where you met me. I wouldn't be sitting here today. 145th publisher said yes.
Wow.
And if anyone out there is an author, this is a great quote from Barbara Kingsolver, who I have in one of my books. She says, "When you get that rejection letter back, it doesn't mean your book is no good. It means the editor who will love your book does not live at this address."
That's that's good. That's good. What about like we know what to do, but we procrastinate, as an example. I think
Yes.
many of us are like, why do we procrastinate even though we know this thing is something we need to do? We're passionate about the goal. We
Yeah.
want to make it happen, but we hesitate. We don't take action.
It
What
goes
is
back
that?
to it goes back to limiting beliefs. So anytime you're
Uh-huh.
procrastinating, you want to take yourself through that exercise we just talked about
Okay.
earlier. The fear of rejection. I'm going to make money. All my relatives will come after me. It's not
Mm.
Christian. The easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than a
Maybe
rich
there's
man
like
to enter heaven.
a conflicting belief or something
Yeah,
like
it's a
that. Yeah.
belief. You've got two kind of beliefs. You got beliefs that are for you, moving you forward, and you got beliefs that are trying to protect you. Your ego is trying to
Hmm.
protect you because
Hmm.
you were, as a child, that belief got you in trouble.
Yeah.
That you could have what you wanted, you could ask for what you want, whatever. Don't bother Aunt Nancy. I had a rich aunt. My parents would always say when I went to her house, "Don't ask her for anything." And so it's not okay to ask. That's why I wrote that book, The Aladdin Factor. I was really learning to ask again and writing about what I was learning, and it
Yeah.
worked. I'm a good
Yeah.
asker now. And you're going to
Wow.
get no's. So what? Um, when people say no, you say next. There's 8
Yeah.
billion people on the planet. Someone out there is a yes. Someone
Mm.
out there is a yes. I just give you an interesting story. I was up in Boulder Creek and San Jose doing that conference where I met Joe Dispenza. And there was a guy there by the name of Gordy Bal, B-A-L. And he's written a new book about the kind of the millionaire mind. You can look up his name on YouTube or on Facebook, Amazon. But what he said was really interesting, how he got wealthy. He didn't have a lot of money, but he got together with a lot of people who did. He said, "We're all going to pitch in. We're all going to pitch in what we can. $10. $10,000, $5,000, $25,000 until we get to 1 million. And then we're going to make an investment. The group will decide what it is." So they bought Aura, Oura. Remember Aura rings? They bought,
Yeah.
they bought stock in Aura rings for $1 million.
Wow.
Today, that stock is worth $76 million.
Wow.
Now, so what they did is let's all pay ourselves some profit out of that. But now we have a venture capital fund and we can keep investing in things. So most people go, I'm not rich enough to have a venture capital fund. I bet you and 25 or 30 of your friends do if you were to go and organize everybody. So now we've got this money we can play with. And now we can look at impact in investing because all these young people that he was bringing together want to make a difference in the world. He was sharing something really important, Coot, that over the next 5 to 10 years, $1 trillion is going to leave the hands of people my age and go to their children. All these,
Wow.
all these Silicon Valley billionaires, real estate moguls, all these Wall Street, guys, they're going to leave their money to their kids. And all these kids didn't make that money. And they're kind of confused. What do I do with it? There's guilt, there's shame, there's confusion. So he's working with them, putting together a group to educate themselves to make sure they're investing in the things that matter and to pool their resources. Imagine even $1 billion of that all
Yeah.
focused on change in the culture.
Yeah.
Like Aura Ring has helped a lot of people get better
Wow.
sleep, know when they need to see their doctor and so on and so forth. So it's not that we don't, why don't we say it's not a lack of resources, it's a lack of being resourceful that stop us. The resources exist. They're all there. We have to go ask for them, earn them, whatever it might be, and put it together. But we stop because we think, well, why would they say yes to me? Who am I?
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, Howard
Well,
Schultz, who started Starbucks,
Starbucks.
turned down by 217 banks and investors before he got a dollar to start Starbucks. Two-
Wow.
217 times. And now he's worth
Wow.
$3 billion.
Crazy. Crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, asking, that's a big one.
Yeah.
I think many of
Yeah.
us were afraid of the rejection. We're afraid of feeling being perceived a certain way. So we'll
Yeah.
protect
Yeah.
ourselves. Yeah.
We want people to think we already have it or we already
Yeah.
know we're not needy or
Hmm.
whatever. And
Hmm.
and the fear of rejection, somehow I'll lose something. I always say this, if I asked you to have lunch with me and you said no, my life didn't get worse. I didn't have anyone to eat lunch with before. I don't have anyone to eat lunch with now.
You're exactly where you were before, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Jack,
Exactly.
is there um as you look at your life, you lived a hell of a life so far, and you're in great health. I believe the best is yet to come.
Mhm.
Um, are there any goals that as you look at your life, you're like, this is something meaningful that I have not yet achieved?
Yeah.
Is there something that comes up that you can share that's like, wow, this
Sure.
would be, maybe it's even a stretch for you even at this stage, or something they'd be like, that would be
Yeah.
meaningful.
I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to give you a 150-second answer on
Please.
the last question about
Yeah.
procrastination. We talked about dealing with your limiting beliefs, but the other way to get through procrastination is to have an accountability partner. So if you and I were
Oh,
accountability partners, we would talk every morning for maybe 3 or 4 minutes. I
yeah.
would tell you what are the 5 things I'm going to do today to work on my number one goal.
Oh, uh-huh,
You would tell me
uh-huh.
your five, and tomorrow you'd have to report if you did them or not. And
Yeah,
by the time
yeah.
it gets to Thursday and you still haven't done it, you start to get embarrassed. And you'll stay up till
Mm,
midnight to do it just because you don't want to say no to me anymore that you didn't do it.
mhm, mhm.
So most people listening to these kind of podcasts these days, they're solo entrepreneurs. They work for themselves. They're a coach.
Yes.
They're an entrepreneur. They're or they run the company. They don't have a boss. So if
Mhm,
I ask Ronnie, who works for me, to call the president, she doesn't think she's going to get through, but she'll call anyway. She'll call the White House.
mm.
But I could sit there for 9 hours and go, they'll never talk to me. Why would I call the White? Why would I waste my time? So if I know that you're going to hold me accountable to what I say I'm going to do,
Mm.
then that helps move through procrastination.
That's a good
Okay.
point.
And the other thing is called scale it down. In other words, there's this thing now called micro actions. You don't have to do the whole thing at once. So instead of like giving a speech to 100 people, give a speech to 5 people, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
Uh, so there's that. So as far as goals I haven't achieved yet, yeah, I've got several books that I want to write. One is called, I'm not going to share the title because I'm afraid someone will steal it.
Mhm.
And I'm not really afraid. I just don't want them to
Yeah,
take
yeah.
use. But it's all about love. It's about,
Mm,
it's about being in a state of love. What's the opposite of love? It's not hate, it's fear. We're all afraid.
mhm,
And so basically, I want to do a book that basically teaches people how to create an ongoing state of love.
mm,
Love is something you create, and we have to be responsible for that. But there are
yeah,
tools. There are
yeah,
many tools, as you know, that you teach and I
yeah.
teach, that I want everyone to have access to. And
Mm,
it's going to be inspiring because there'll be stories of people who've overcome obstacles to love and pushed through
mhm,
and been loving and been compassionate and served and so forth. But also very practical tools, certain
mhm.
meditations and visualizations and so forth,
Yeah.
actions. Like if every day you did an act of kindness to somebody, that will raise your love. You can't do that and not feel more loving. So
Yeah.
it can be as simple as smiling,
Mm.
smiling at a stranger.
It's free.
Yeah, look in the mirror and smile at yourself. I mean, there's
Yeah.
so many things you can do. So I want to write that book. There's travel I haven't done to
Wow.
certain. I want to go to the Great Wall of China, the clay soldiers in Xi'an in China.
Yeah.
I want to see
Wow.
those. I have not yet been to 2 cities in Europe that I'm really excited about.
Mm.
We're going to do that in the fall with my wife and I, and then see my grandson graduate high school and things like that.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. So this is really your final event in terms of
Yeah,
the breakthrough to
yeah.
success.
Here's
Not
the
that you
deal.
won't do other stuff. Like, how did you come? Yeah. I guess you were 80 at the birthday party, but like, is
I
it really your
just
final event? Because if it is, I think I'm going to be there. I'm coming.
You should. But here's the deal. I have a lot of people coming because of that. And it's not a fear of missing out thing we're doing. It's just really going to be the last one that
Yeah.
we do. I have 12 staff. At the end of June, I'll have two. So all the people
Wow.
that put those on and do all that work, that won't be working with me anymore. All the
Mm,
social media people and so forth. So I'll keep my assistant and part-time the person that does all my accounting, and
mm,
because I need that support. But basically, I am going to be cutting back, not putting on any kind of seminars. I
mm,
will respond occasionally. Let's say you called me up and said, Jack, I have 50 people in Houston, and if you came for 2 days and taught them, your basic success principles, and I'll pay you $50,000 for that, I might say yes.
yeah.
Um, because I don't have to develop anything new. It's not
Yeah.
custom made, something I already know how to do. Houston's an easy flight for me. But
Sure.
if you said come to India for a 3 city
India.
tour, I'd
Ah,
say no, I'm not doing that anymore. No more
yeah.
international flights.
Hmm.
Uh, and for a year, I probably wouldn't even say yes to that request that I just mentioned,
Mm,
because I really, really want to open up that space and see what wants to emerge. I've already
mm.
started like to have this incredible interest in what they call unidentified anonymous phenomenon, which used to be
Yeah. Yeah.
UFOs,
Yeah.
and I'm fascinated with that whole world. And I have some.
Wow.
One of my friends runs a university where they actually you can get a degree in that, which I thought, like, really,
Wow.
so that's cool. And I would love to be involved in somehow communicating with people from other life forms
Mm,
from other planets. We know they exist. That's no longer
mhm,
an issue.
mhm,
The question is, what are they here for, and how do we interact with them? And then
mm,
I'm also interested in past life people who not well past life regression, but more importantly, near death experiences. So I'm a member
mm,
of the International Association of Near Death Society,
mhm,
and the idea that people are. When I was in college, this guy gave me a book. It was called Life After Life, and it was by Raymond Moody, and he'd interviewed 50 people who died and then were resuscitated, 5 minutes, 20 minutes later, whatever. And they told him what happened while they were dead. They all came back with this wisdom.
mm,
They either
mm,
met Jesus or they met Buddha or they met an angel, and they were given all this wisdom. And the way I said that when I was in college, I was in the School of Education, it's actually graduate school. I said, wow, there is a final exam. Because when you get there, they ask you two questions.
mhm,
What wisdom did you learn in your life? And how have you expanded your capacity to love?
mm.
And I said, as an educator, oh my God, there really is a final exam. And there's two questions. And somebody stole the questions. So we can prepare.
Yeah, yeah.
So I remember thinking, I want to teach about love and I want to teach
Mm,
how to have more wisdom, extract wisdom from their experience. And
mhm,
that's what I've been doing. So,
mhm.
but I'm interested in that,
Wonderful.
and we'll see what emerges. I don't know. I want to just have some open space that allows something new to, if it wants
Yeah,
to come in, or maybe I'll
yeah.
just kick back and turn
I'm
on the
excited.
internet.
Honestly, I'm excited for you. And when someone such as yourself, who I've long respected, is saying, "I want to write a book about love," I'm really excited about that because you've taught about self-esteem, you've taught about success, and it's kind of like building love into that now as an expression feels so
Yeah,
full and ripe and complete. I think it's a beautiful thing.
yeah,
Tell us a bit about Breakthrough to Success. 3 days at the end of June. We're going to put all of the links in the show notes,
sure,
but just kind of give people a sense of like the event, what's going to happen. I'd love to just take
sure.
a minute or two for you to share.
Well, there'll be, right now I think we have 207 people signed up. By June, there might be 300 or 400. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But
Awesome.
basically, it's a 3-day seminar. And the first day, we talk a lot about what we talked about here,
Mhm,
redefine what success is for you. We get you really clear about your life purpose, what your most
mhm,
heartfelt dreams and desires are. We have you create what we call a breakthrough goal. If there was one thing you achieve that would affect everything, what
mhm,
would that be? It might be a financial goal, it might be a health goal, it might be a uh, business goal. One year we had a Dallas chiropractor in our program, and he went back and he said the breakthrough for him would be to have his own radio show where he could
wow.
talk about nutrition and health and exercise and subluxations in the spine and so forth. He went back. He got so successful at that, he had to open up 4 satellite offices, hire 4 other chiropractors. He would go to each one of the offices every day and make millions of dollars now. There was a woman named Miriam Laundrie. She came, we did this exercise called the I can't exercise, where you have to say I can't over and over, and then replace it with I won't. and you feel much more powerful. She went back,
Mm.
wrote a book called I Can Believe in Myself, and she got a Guinness World Record for having 138,000 people online listening to her
Wow.
read the book. People have tripled their incomes, started businesses, bought their dream home. You know,
Mm.
on and on. But basically, you got really clear about what is it that would really fulfill
Mm.
yourself, but
Mm.
also for fulfill your soul. And
Mm.
then the second day is called transform your beliefs. What we talked about this heart, what's called a heart freedom method. How do we free our heart to do what we want, so we're not
Mm.
being constricted by these limiting beliefs? We talked about that at great length. How to overcome fear. Fear is all self-created. There's a way to, if we create it, we can uncreate it. So we'll teach you that. How to master the law of attraction, manifest whatever you
Mm.
want in your life, and make life less struggle and less pain and more easy. That's basically that.
Yeah.
And that night we'll have a vision board party where everyone gets to make a vision board, cutting out
Oh.
pictures and words, and we have a that's really fun. It's a very
Uh-huh.
powerful evening. And
Mm.
then the last day is called Build Your Dreams, and we'll talk about the power of intention. We'll talk about gratitude. We'll talk about a little more about creative visualization. Something we
Mm.
teach called the Hour of Power, which
Hmm.
is 20 minutes of meditation, 20 minutes of exercise, and 20 minutes of reading something uplifting. Uh, I found out I wrote a forward for a book called The $1 Billion Secret that a guy wrote.
Wow.
He interviewed 21 billionaires, and every one of them, the guy that makes the most windshields for cars in China, a guy who opens up grocery stores in Russia every 7 days, these really all ages, all cultures, and every one of them meditated. I was shocked to find that
Wow.
out. Every one of them exercised every day. Every one of them read for at least an hour a day. So again, what are you doing? You're feeding your mind, you're feeding your body, you're feeding your soul, and you're doing all the things we need to do to be successful.
Hmm.
So we'll work at that. We start every morning with a meditation, so you'll leave with three powerful meditations you can do as well. We'll
Hmm.
also work on overcoming procrastination, which we talked about, perfectionism, which is one of the reasons people procrastinate. How to utilize feedback in your life. Most people are afraid of feedback. They don't ask for feedback.
Hmm.
They think it's
Wow.
going to be negative, but feedback is simply it gives you information about how you can do it better. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
we'll look at that and why we don't do it and how to do
Hmm.
it. And um, and then we end the last day with what we call a come as you'll be cocktail reception,
Hmm.
where for an hour and a half you're going to pretend it's 5 years into the future, and you
Wow.
are going to be that new person that you wanted to be. You've accomplished all your goals. You're living your life. You're
Hmm.
in that new space. It's an affirmation that's kinesthetic, auditory, and visual because you're walking
Hmm.
around. People are talking about their book or
Hmm.
talking about their, just on Oprah, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then we'll go into a dinner and we have a dancing with a DJ. It's a real celebration. So
Mm.
that's the 3 days. And I will tell
Beautiful.
you, everybody comes out. I call it like a car wash. Everybody comes out more loving, more self-confidence, a clear path of what they want to do to get to where they want to go.
Powerful. So I know that's what, June the 26th, 27th, 28th. Where is it?
It's going to be in Irvine, California,
Fine. Okay,
Orange
perfect.
County. And I know that you're going to put in your show notes a URL
Yeah.
that they
Yes.
can click on. That'll take you to the website that'll allow you to enroll. And basically, there's two kind of tickets. There's a regular ticket. There's a VIP ticket. The VIP ticket gets you lunches for 3 days, and 2 of those days I'll do Q&A with you at lunch. And
Mm.
it also gets you recordings of the program for a month and all kinds of cool things. So if you want to
Amazing.
do that, you can as well. And it think of it as an investment, not a price, not a cost.
Mhm,
It's tuition.
mhm,
You're being taught
mhm,
inwardly. And I
mhm.
promise you that, everyone tells us they say I would pay way more than what it costs to do this.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Mm,
And
mm,
what's his name? Warren Buffett. We all know Warren Buffett, one of the richest guys on the planet. He says the most important thing you can invest in is yourself.
mm,
So
mm,
think of this as an investment in yourself,
mm,
and ask yourself, when's the last time I went away to reprogram my brain, to
mm.
reprogram my heart, to open it up, to
Yeah,
fulfill myself?
yeah,
So I promise you, the benefits are going to way outweigh
yeah.
inconvenience of traveling and doing all that stuff. But it's an amazing community. And something Joe Dispenza said when he talked on Friday Coop, transformation that takes place in a community of like-minded people with a similar intention is much more powerful than even that same number of people watching on the internet. The internet's good stuff. We
Listen.
all do that because we have to. But
Mm,
being in a room there's something that happens to your physiology, to your
Yeah.
brain.
Yeah.
So that's the value of being at a live seminar as well.
Amazing. Folks, you heard it. Breakthrough to Success, June 26, 27, 28, 3 days in Irvine with the one and only Jack Canfield. After 50 years, this is going to be the final Breakthrough to Success. If you haven't experienced Jack, I really want to invite each of you to be there. I think I'm going to see if I can rearrange my schedule, Jack, and I think I'm going to be in the room for this one.
I would love it.
And just, folks, just think about it this way. This man, honestly, I say this from my heart, this man for 50 years has spoken, written books, taught, trained millions of people around the world. And I think the ability to compress that 50 years of knowledge into 3 days, you're like compressing decades into days. For me, that's a quantum leap. There's no price tag on that. So I'm seriously going to see about rearranging my schedule, Jack. So you might see me in the audience clapping, and if I'm the crazy guy in the audience, just know, oh, that's cool.
I'd love to have you here, Coot. That'd be a real
That'd
treat.
be great. So, folks, we're going to put all of Jack's links in the show notes. Obviously, jackcanfield.com, but we're going to put the specific links for the Breakthrough to Success, June 26th, 27th, 28th in the show notes. I encourage all of you to be there, whatever it takes. Jack, I love you so much. You're a big brother. You're an inspiration. It's an honor to know you. It's a blessing to be a part of your life in some way. Folks, share this episode with anybody in your life that you love. Send me an email, cootblackson@cootblackson.com. I would love to hear your key takeaways from today's episode, and I will catch you in next week's episode of Soul Talk. Jack.
That's
amazing.
Great.
Love it. Thank you so much, man.
You're welcome.
I'm seriously going to try to rearrange some things.
Good. When do you think this will air?
I think we're going to try to air this either next week or the following week. It's
Okay,
going to be,
good.
we're going to try to give it a push, and I'm going to promote it on social media, and, we know
Great.
it's a bit of promotion in May. So
Wonderful.
whatever we
Okay.
could do.
Well, thank you
Appreciate
so much for the
Bless
opportunity.
you.
Yeah.
God bless. Big hugs.
Okay.
To you and
Look,
Inga. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Love you. Bye.
Bye.